It's my honor to introduce the CEO of ComEd, Anne Pramaggiore. She is the president and CEO, the utility company delivering electricity to 3.8 million customers in Chicago and Northern Illinois. She joined ComEd to work on the company's transition to competitive energy markets in 1998. She steered that as the lead lawyer for ComEd as the head of regulatory policy, and she led a lot of major policy overhauls that today provide that framework for this next generation of energy. In 2009, Anne was appointed as ComEd's COO, and she became responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations, and also steered, subsequently, the company's efforts to set the legislative framework for ComEd's smart grid build-out. And Anne was promoted to her current position in February 2012. While it's of note that she's the first female to hold the post of president and CEO at the electric utility, I think it's even more of note that Energy Biz named her the CEO of the Year, genderless title, and that she had this role as the new member of the board of the Chicago Federal Reserve, as well as Motorola Solutions, and several civic and community organizations. As someone with a liberal arts degree, it is really, really encouraging that someone with a theater degree can become the CEO of a major utility in the United States. And I'm just like, yeah, man, help that liberal arts in me. So without further ado, she also got a law degree, so I mean she's smart. But, but with that, I want to introduce you to Anne Pramaggiore. Pramaggiore. So I'm not fully James Lipton, but I do have my notes. And we had a great conversation with, WBEZ this morning just highlighted the work that ComEd has already done since 2012 to today. And what lies ahead is, on one end, daunting because you need to stage the logistics, the framing, the rolling out of so many different activities. But for those that aren't familiar, since the beginning of 2012, you've really steered the utility in a new direction. Can you give the audience just a quick recap of the last 3 years and what we can expect for the next 3 years, just a sense of this?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Drew, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here, and thanks for the warm welcome. We passed, with the help of a lot of stakeholders and the General Assembly, a piece of legislation in 2011 that really started to modernize the grid, and the short version of it is it's a $2.6 billion 10-year improvement program. About half of it is traditional spend, wire, poles, manhole refurbishment, and about half of it is smart investment. Smart meters, distribution automation that Randy talked about. We use both G&W and S&C reclosers. Put a lot of them on the system in the last couple years, and smart substations. So put a lot of digital technology, sensor technology on the system. And the whole idea was to raise the quality of the grid and start to develop a platform for a 21st century economy. The longer story is we felt as part of that we really had three commitments that we made around that. The first was to improve the reliability of the system and to modernize. The second was to put more control and choice into the hands of our customers. And the third was to really reinvigorate the communities. We were in the depths of the financial crisis at that point in time, and so whatever we could do to refurbish, to re-energize the communities, that was part of this too. So the results on reliability have been, we've seen the avoidance of 4 million outages since we started this program, thanks in large part to cable replacement and the reclosers, the distribution automation. We've improved storm restoration times by 30%. We've seen ComEd's best reliability record in history. We're very proud of that. We're very excited about that. On the customer engagement side, the customer control, we're about 1.3 million meters into our 4 million meter program. We've put in a peak time rebate program associated with that. We have a Nest programmable thermostat program associated with that. We have worked with a company called Bidgley, and this is one of my favorites. You can get an app that has, we're piloting it right now, but it has in real time what your usage is in the home, but they also have algorithms that drive down into the appliance that's driving the particular usage. So you can actually do something about what's happening based on this information. So those are some of the things that we're putting into the hands of customers to empower them, to give them more ability to control this critical service. And then finally, on the community side, we've invested about $2.5 billion in Illinois in supply chain. About $1 billion of that is a diverse supply chain spend. We've developed a number of programs in the community. We've got a program called Construct, and it's designed to help diversify the construction trades. It's a training program with some of our community partners. We built one new training station in Rockford, Illinois, our first from the ground up training station ever in ComEd's 125-year history. And we're about to finish one on Chicago's South Side here at the end of the year, beginning of 2016. So that's some of the community involvement and impact. And finally, I will say 3,600 jobs. The Act actually required 2,000, and we've hit 3,600, so we feel really good about that. So we're so excited about this, and I can't tell you what it's done for the company. I mean, I've sort of given you all the statistics and information on what it's done outside the company, but inside the company, just the degrees of freedom that our folks have to innovate and to create new platforms for customers and really problem solve for customers. It's very exciting. We're very excited about it. So thank you for asking.
And I appreciate it. You know, I'm a former utility employee myself. I worked at Austin Energy for years. We helped develop the Pecan Street project, and you know, at the time when that came out, we were really curious about this integrated grid, this interoperability, and we were seeing so much on the technical side. But you just brought something up so important, which is that human capital. It's the social capital. The employees of ComEd live here.
Yep.
They keep the lights on and they do more for the community because those are their neighbors. And you just talked about these new training locations. What do you think the human value is within your organization? And this is a little off script, but I'm just so interested in it. Because I saw at Austin Energy how powerful, when things are going right in the utility, how motivated the staff can be.
Yes.
And so what was that like? I mean, seriously, 1998, you look at where ComEd was, it's not a guilt trip, it's an exhortation of truth.
Right.
It's a matter of fact, right? And then to where it is now. How do you do that? What are your lessons of that leadership, and what would you impart to folks like this that want to understand what it's like to operate a huge utility like that? What the challenges and opportunities there?
Yeah, well, there's obviously a lot of ways to answer that question, but I think what I'd like to do is sort of answer where you started, which was the community and the culture question.
Yeah.
Because I think culture is the great distinguisher of companies. If
Yes.
you want to, there's a lot of companies who can do the functionality of a business, but I think where you really distinguish yourself is in the culture and that's your people and what do they bring to the table. And I think that this is true of many utilities, and I find it to be, very, very true of ComEd. Is there's this core culture of service orientation, and it manifests itself in many ways. It manifests itself in people who are willing to stay up all night in order to get the lights on, people who are willing to go out in very, treacherous conditions to get people up to power. Cheryl Malatich is sitting here today. She runs our operating center, and this is the woman, when there's a storm on, who dispatches all the crews over our 11,000 square mile service territory to get your lights on, and she's up all night long doing that day after day until you guys get back up to power. And that kind of commitment it permeates through the organization.
Yes.
And so it manifests itself in other ways, and you talked about community. We're a different kind of business. We don't grow by moving to China or looking for new markets in Europe. We grow when our communities thrive. And so we have a unique, I think, perspective and investment in the community. We're very, very focused on supporting communities. We hire virtually all of our employees from the communities. Our employees live in the communities where we work. So we have executives who are on 90 boards, community boards. We spend a lot of time volunteering. I'll tell you, my folks after, we had that very, very devastating tornado in Coal City.
Yes.
The second time in a year and a half that city had been hit by a tornado, and I mean, it was, the infrastructure was wiped out. So our crews got in there, they're always first responders, they're some of the first in. You got to get the electric infrastructure up if you're going to do anything else.
Yep.
So they're the first ones in there, they get that town restored. A week later, we had a group of employees who on their own went out there to help clean up. Not part of the job, just part of what the company is about. And that kind of DNA and that kind of culture is just tremendous, and it'll take you a long way, and I'm really proud of it and proud of what our people do.
And you need to do that quietly before the media starts picking up. I actually saw that Chicago Tribune noticed that, and they actually reported on the staff actually working on that. And it was interesting, in my own prep for this, full disclosure, everyone, I think there was, calls in February, meetings in June, and prep in July, where I was talking with your staff who they had automatic replies. I've been working till 6, I will be working until 2 a.m. We have this many outages and we need to get these done before we address any outside concerns. I worked at Austin Energy. Straight up, we never had an automatic responder that said that. It's great to know that people are, top concern is public health, safety, and welfare, and keeping the lights on, quite literally. And I just thought that was it was a real testament to what you're saying about the culture there. It also has to do with the grid of the future. We're going to have more and more the resilience question, the cyber and the physical, all in bed with this question of what's this grid of the future, right? The renewables, the storage, your generation fleet, all this important talk of an integrated grid, changing needs and interests in renewables, among other things. What's an integrated grid to you, and how do you see it evolving in Illinois, given all the optics of everything?
Well, so we have an integrated grid. Interestingly, it's the sort of historic development of the grid. So when we first started putting the electric infrastructure together, it wasn't integrated. It was actually disaggregated, and over time it became integrated. And when you get to the 1960s, largely integrated from the East Coast to the Rocky Mountains is kind of where there's a break. So we have an integrated grid, and the benefits of that are economies of scale. This is very much an economies of scale kind of business, and reliability. You don't have to build as much power to serve people, and you can lean on other sources of power when some go out. So you have a reliability and an economies of scale kind of benefit to it. So we have an integrated grid. I think the question that has been posed is with new technology, new battery technology, new solar, distributed generation, distributed resources, solar. The question I think has been posed is, can you go off the grid and isolate yourself? Do you want to, as a customer, go off the grid and isolate yourself? And I think our answer to that is there are some customers who will want to do that, but we think that network economies rule. Network economies are still the name of the game, and they're still going to deliver this service most beneficially, most economically, most affordably, and to customers. We think that the grid, if you create your policy appropriately, you incent the right kind of investment, the grid can get you to clean and green faster, more affordably, and more equitably than any other mechanism out there, and we think you ought to use it in that way. So the way we think about the integrated grid, I think of it as 3 different networks. One is the physical grid, the network, and we think of that as we need to modernize, we need to create resiliency, which is different from reliability. That's the ability to withstand weather and security events. And we need to be able to connect distributed generation. So we've got a hybrid system, central station and distributed generation. The second network is the digital network. We hang our AMI on it, our smart meters. We can hang a lot of things on it. Our folks are testing smart street lights that we can actually dim remotely, brighten remotely if a municipality has an event, and create efficiencies through that. So
and all sorts of sensors in them too. I mean, those are fascinating sensors. Everything from the recognition of gunshots to pollutions to traffic. I mean, it's fascinating the amount of sensors you guys are looking at testing and trialing in that.
That's exactly right. And we think this digital platform, you start to move from usage to uses.
Yes.
And the more uses you can put on this digital platform, the more value you bring to it, and also you reduce cost for any particular use. And then the final network is this what I call the social network, and that is our ability to reach customers. It is
Yeah.
almost unparalleled as a utility. We have social media, we have web, we have call centers, we have account management, and you can use this social platform, this communications platform, to get information and tools out to customers. And I think when you converge these three platforms and you set your policy correctly, there's tremendous value in that for the future, and that's how I think about the integrated grid.
And you're able to do all the technical part, and John Rowe laughed at me about this morning, but I was pointing out, there's three types of interoperability. There's technical interoperability, and I think we will all get there. But then there's interorganizational interoperability and interpersonal interoperability, meaning you need to build good faith. You need to work with someone and then build an agenda with them, trying to figure that out. It's a two-way conversation with the audience now. You can't hide from the audience. They will put it on social media. That social platform is real. How do you engage a behemoth like ComEd with the community in a two-way dialogue on that social platform? I mean, that's a challenge for all utilities, but I mean, in a city as opinionated as Chicago, how do you do that? And honestly.
No, it's a great question. I mean, I think one of the things is we have, we actually affirmatively outreach to stakeholder groups.
I've noticed.
I mean, we
Yeah.
do that much more, I think, than we used to, and that is one channel that we use, and that's part of, again, part of the way we want to conduct business. We have social media now. We have Jane Park over here, who's the guru of our social media platform, and we get a lot of information from that. They kind of give me a little bit of grief because I'm always on Twitter. But I never tweet out, but I always watch what our customers are saying on Twitter.
That's
because
good.
it gives you tremendous insight. And the other aspect of this, your question about how do you touch customers and how do you make that interconnection is, we're an industry that's built on averages. So we've averaged rates over 125 years. We have provided everybody with roughly the same service over 125 years. Everything, it's a game of averages. That's changing dramatically. It's now a game of granularity. How much individual service, individual information can you impart to customers to give them more choices and control? And that's a huge shift for us.
Yes.
But actually platforms like Twitter kind of help you to start to make that shift, because what you're getting now is you may have restored 99% of your customers, but you see that tweet where you've got one customer out there who is in very, very dire circumstances. We had one where we had a storm, this was last summer, on Twitter, told us that he was getting married in about 2 hours, and there was an outage at the country club where he was getting married. And that's how we found out about it. But we got out there. Fidel Marquez, our great governmental affairs director, got out there. We got the crews out there. We got him back up. I think, Cheryl, what was maybe 5 or 10 minutes from the time the wedding started, but we got, we got it done. But that's how we found out about it. So
Right.
this paying attention to the individual customer's need is a really, really big shift for us. And some of these platforms are ways to get there. We're just starting to learn about them.
That's awesome. So what's ahead for ComEd then in terms of new developments in the next year? The future energy plans really, it's been socialized pretty extensively within the media, within Springfield, and within the community, and within the audience here. But sort of from your take, what's next?
So we're working on two paths to some extent. So this is our peak investment year on the smart grid build. So
Yes.
we will have, we'll put in over 1 million meters this year. And,
Right.
So a lot of work there. It starts to taper off a little bit. So we've got our eye on that ball, because we've got to get that work done. We've got to make sure that the benefits are delivered to customers. And then on a parallel path, we're thinking about how we get into the integrated grid. How do we start developing these 3 networks that I talked about? So we set a piece of legislation out in Springfield. Obviously, there's a lot going on in Springfield, so it's out there. We'll see what happens. But we've proposed some pieces in there that we think are important from a policy standpoint.
Yes.
And we really wanted to have the dialogue and explore them. So one is, when you have a grid where people are starting to make special uses, how do you ensure that the costs of the grid are still being covered for the benefit of everyone? So we're still a public benefit kind of business. And so we put a rate design proposal out there on that. We also sort of
Demand-based rates.
Demand-based rates, exactly. Tested the resiliency question. We've proposed a series of microgrids. We don't think
Which is really interesting right now. I mean, the whole audience is abuzz around microgrids and islanding and distributed energy resources. So please, if you want to get extensive, I think the Bronzeville project is one of the most interesting I know of.
We're very excited about the microgrids. So just from a policy standpoint, we don't think we do microgrids for all purposes. That's not our job. But we do think that there's a niche for us, and that is public critical infrastructure, where socializing the cost of that is appropriate because the benefits are also broadly based.
Yes.
We're not going to go in and build a microgrid for a manufacturing company or an industrial park. That's not where we play. But we do think that there's a role here, because otherwise these things likely won't get done. So we've put a proposal of doing 6 of these, and really to come back to the Illinois Commerce Commission on the back end and say, now let's study what happened here. Are these the right places? Did we use the right generation sources?
Yes.
If we're going to dispatch these things, did we do it appropriately? And who makes the call on what are the rules of the road around that? But one of the things that I feel strongly about in terms of the regulatory model is, there's a lot of claims that it's slow and it's slowing down utilities as technology is accelerating. And I think if you think about flipping the regulatory process a little bit, so right now we go in and we do an 11-month proceeding to decide to do something. We do it, and then we come back and have another proceeding to kind of sort it out. And I say flip that a little bit, do a very short proposal. Here's my hypothesis, here's the money I'm going to spend, here's what I intend to prove out.
Yep.
Go do it, and then come back in
Test
for the
and validate.
11-month proceeding on the back end after you've got data.
I like that.
So in any event, we're trying to set up something like that with the microgrids. But the idea is water pumping stations, healthcare, transportation, those sort of public critical infrastructure kinds of functions that when you've got an emergency event, you want to make sure are up and running for people. And then the Bronzeville is a little bit different. We've got Shay Baramrad here and Joseph Ahula, who have been just tremendous on designing this. This is a community.
With a lot of partners.
Tremendous amount of partners. And it's the idea is really a community microgrid, and we want to test. When you have business, residential, emergency response, I think we've got Chicago Police Headquarters in there. How does that all work? And then, Shay and her team have been designing the controller, which connects it to the Illinois Institute of Technology existing microgrid, and then how do you dispatch between 2 different microgrids?
Yes.
And we think that may be the first time that anyone will test this.
Absolutely.
Really excited about it, and Joe and Shay, their team has just been tremendous. I think the algorithms, all the designs, I think they're getting patents on that stuff. It's beyond me. I can't. It's literally Greek to me when I look at those things. But being a liberal arts major, but they're just doing a fabulous
Our deep
job.
dark secrets. We won't tell anyone else, right? So, that sort of ties me into the next question, and I'm, kudos to your communications team for allowing me to ask about the utility death spiral. So, there's a lot of certain pundits, media outlets that have brought up the notion of a utility death spiral because of the advent of renewables, distributed generation, and distributed energy resources, and what happens next. And it really goes in with what, when John Rowe was on stage this morning, I said, hey, so, you helped ComEd get from 1998 out of that into this new culture, this new way of doing things, and your protege is going to be on stage. He called you his protege. And I said, what question would you ask Ann? And he said, this isn't something I haven't asked her. But he said, not the political points, but what's your business case for this new future energy plan? What is the business case? What is the IRR? What is cost recovery? What are those capital investment budgets going to look like 15 years out for yours, 30 years out, 40 years out for a successor? That's a really good question. So
It's a great question.
I pose it to you.
Yeah. So there's a number of questions wrapped up in
Yeah,
that
of course,
question.
sorry,
And John
sorry.
has been, he's, no. And John is, he's a great mentor of mine, and I just, he's terrific and a great thinker for the industry.
He is.
The industry's really,
It's better
very
off with him
fortunate
being
to
more
have-
active again.
No question.
It's good to see him back out there.
No question, absolutely. But I think the way, so I'll take sort of one question as I'm sorting through them at a time. So I think, the way we think about what's the case, for the future. So, and the death spiral. So I always like to use the Twain, reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. But I do think there's a fair question there, and that is, as technology advances and you start to get to the point where the economics suggests that people can pull themselves off the grid, do they want to do that?
Right.
And again, I told you, our philosophy is, we're the fastest, most affordable, most equitable way to a clean energy system. But we've got to prove that. And that, I think, is, our case is to prove that, to develop this system of, these three networks, to bring them into convergence in a way that we're providing so much value that people don't want to move off the grid. That's the idea behind it. The business case piece, a question of, so how do you make money off of this? I think part of it is in the current model, I think, with some evolution and tweaks, holds to some extent. But again, sort of incenting the deployment of capital for its own sake is not where you want to be at the end of the day.
Right.
So I think there's still something in that, because let's face it, the system creates very low-cost capital, and it is a capital-intensive industry, and it will continue to be that way. Even though what you spend capital on will shift from things like wires and poles more to IT systems, but nonetheless you have still significant investment. So I think there's an element of the old world that stays. And then, I talked about uses versus usage. And I think, this is all very conceptual now, but the notion that you can hang many uses off of this digital platform and start to create value that way and bring in revenue streams. And, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can allocate costs off the system as it exists. To reduce costs for customers who are using that infrastructure. You can bring streams in above the line or below the line. But I think those are some of the things we're working with, just trying to, variations on the theme of, the basic regulatory model, but with the notion that you create more uses and you drive costs down, and that's how you bring value to customers. So. And I know we had a question on stranded costs.
Yeah.
And I think we have to, that's one we have to grapple with. I think, a couple things that we've been working with that I think start to answer the question, but I think there's a lot more to be done in that area. One is pre-approval. When we put the smart grid bill in, we all agreed to the investment programs up front.
Right.
So that, I think there's an element of that in there. And still more work to be done on that, though.
I'm really beginning to understand your uses versus usage point, especially when I think about my phone. It's annihilated my need for a flashlight, a compass, a calculator. And so packaging that up in a meter, there's going to be a lot of new applications coming out, and you're accepting of that in the next, and sort of helping shape that energy transition for your customers. We probably have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. We prefer them lightning style, so so we can get through our agenda relatively well. If you have a question, please raise your hand and I'll point to you. And I know there's a ton of questions, so don't even lie. Yep.
Yeah, so we have a number of programs. As I said, we have the NEST program. We have a real-time pricing program, which frankly we've got about I think we've got less than 100,000 customers on it, and yet customers save, on average, it's been in place for maybe 6 or 7 years, 20%? 30, okay, I'm on it. It's a great program. It's, I think that will evolve. So we've got peak time rebate now, we've got the real-time pricing program, we've got the NEST program, rush hour rewards, the Bidgely pilot that I told you about also has a demand response piece in it. I think it's an evolutionary thing. I just think we have trained customers for 125 years in this industry not to pay attention to electricity. Everybody pays the same rate, everybody gets the same quality product, so why would you bother? And so this is just, I think it's an evolution. We're, as an industry, getting into the digital world and the ability to start to affect, an impact on pricing. And I think as we, as an industry, offer more options on pricing, and educate consumers, I think that will come along. But it'll take some time and information, getting information out there. And one of the things I didn't talk a lot about is, on this social platform piece, the notion that we can be an enabler, we can really be a marketplace to customers, because We do touch everyone in the service territory, and we do have tremendous access, and to the extent that we can be an enabler, support the offering of products and services of other, third parties to customers, we see that as a potential opportunity too, and gets into the uses versus usage kind of model. But it's slow, but we'll get there.
I had a quick question before this last question, but one of the things that really dawned on me was, as we're about to close, was we have the Japan Smart Communities Alliance has come with a delegation from Japan. We have the Global Smart Cities Collaborative of 3 continents, 9 countries here. They came to Chicago. They both had a strong appetite in meeting with you and your team. It's interesting to me that these global leaders, well recognized as global leaders, are coming to Chicago to see what's happening here. And this emerging, I love that. and the emerging innovation story that is similar to what Fermi and Teller were doing years ago can come back, is coming back, but at the same time, there's this conversation in the community that's disparate from that. How is that role of communication? You probably have something you want to say, but how is that role of communication? How do you share this story that the globe recognizes for your own community so that they see something to be proud of about that? It's very interesting.
It is really interesting, and I'm really glad you said that, Drew. We, the energy history in this city is, outpaces any other city or state or country in the world. I mean, Sam Insel built the operating model and the regulatory or financial model for this industry right here in Chicago. We had the first nuclear reaction right here in Chicago. We've got, the largest portfolio of nuclear power right here in the state of Illinois, and there's many other firsts. And energy really is innovation in energy. This is the heartland of innovation in energy, and
the home of the cell phone.
Yeah, exactly. No, that is absolutely right. And so I think we're starting to, regain some of that ground.
Yeah.
But it is really slow, and it's a communications question. I think that's a great point. I was at the Aspen Institute last week and over the weekend, and one of the things that was interesting is, as you said, a lot of attention on New York, a lot of attention on California, but they were all very interested in what was going on in Chicago. And, so this was a group of industry thinkers and leaders like this group here.
Because more of the country is like Chicago.
Of a focus of Chicago.
It's more like Chicago than it is like LA, San Francisco, or New York City. It is time, I think, that the region sees what it is doing and stops selling itself short. And I think there's an opportunity to build that communication into the community so the community's aware of it. Yeah. And I think you guys have been a good steward of that.
Thanks. Well, and we also, I would just add, retail competition this is one of the most robust retail competition markets in the country. And there was just a study that was published by Phil O'Connor and Aaron O'Connell Diaz that I think put the number at about $40 billion saved by virtue of retail competition since it was put into place in 1998. So that's also a tremendous story of innovation in our city.
Last question. Edison Electric Institute had a survey that 72% of utilities in the United States want to buy up innovation from startups. And it seems to me that between Clean Energy Trust, Energy Foundry, the myriad organizations, J. Caesar, Argonne, all of this stuff, the alignments are so real. How do you see energy innovation taking shape in the near term for Chicago? What should we expect next? Is it going to be microgrids? Is it going to be grid-tied solar with storage? Is it going to be I'm turning off my AC from 10 miles away?
I think it's all of the above. We have some great innovation going on in the city, as you indicated. Energy Foundry, we got Jason here, and it's just there's a number of startup companies. Got some real talent coming out of IIT and Northwestern. We're doing some pilots with university students out of both those schools that are it's really exciting. So I think you're going to see a lot on the resource side, the supply resource side. Prices coming down on batteries. We're doing a pilot right now with SNC on a community battery storage. We're going to put the battery in a neighborhood, It will, in the event of a storm or an outage, bring probably 7 to 10 customers in the neighborhood back up for about 3 hours. So if you got a short outage, it'll run you right through. If it's a longer outage, at least it gives you time to kind of organize yourself before you deal with a longer outage. But we're, testing, we've got that. Argonne has, the battery storage grant from DOE. Tremendous innovation, I think, on the supply side, which I'll put the, battery storage into that bucket. I think really a tremendous innovation on the customer side. And again, our view, when I say customer side, is information, control, all
Actionable
of that.
information.
Yeah,
Empowering
actionable information, exactly, and control. How do I manage my usage? How do
Yes.
I lower my bills? How do I take control here? And I think because to some extent those are easier places to play, I think, for startups on the information side, and there's so much already written on the data side that can be translated into this industry. So I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of work on that. We look to partner with these companies. Again, we feel like we're kind of the marketplace, the enabler. Let's
sandbox.
get that out there. Yeah. We want to get that out there for customers.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Ann. This has
Thanks,
been
Drew.
riveting.
I appreciate it.
Very much appreciate it. And everyone, we want to thank Ann, and then we want to get down to the Armor stage for an exhilarating presentation from your peer, Terry Bassam from KCP&L. Are you going to be, your team is going to be able to hear that, and we're looking forward to it. So,
All right.
everyone, thank you very much. Thank you so much.